Alright, this video is basically looking at setting up a terrain in 3D space in Unity. So as you can see, I'm just on the standard layout at the moment, which is the default layout. I find that this is the easiest to work through just whilst we're setting up everything. So over here in the hierarchy, this is where we're going to be bringing in things into our scene to build. This is our actual scene where you'll be able to see what you are physically building. We have our inspector window over to the right hand side, which will allow us to change parameters on particular objects. And down the bottom we have our project window. So here we'll be able to see any assets that we've brought into Unity that we'll be able to use. Now I have brought in the standard asset package, which we're going to be working with over the next few Unity tutorials, so make sure you do have that standard assets installed. So the first thing we're going to do is go up to our game object menu at the top, and we're going to add in a 3D object. And the 3D object that we're going to be working with today is our terrain. This is basically our world. If I zoom out at the moment, you can see that there is a large flat plane within my world, and this flat plane is what we're going to build our world in. Also over onto our hierarchy, you can see now that there is a terrain that has been created. If you do lose your terrain for any reason, so if I just move off to the side so it's actually out of my scene that I'm building, I can just double click on it and it will then bring it into plain sight in my scene. So just being a flat plane is quite boring, I guess, in our scene. We're wanting to create some mountains or some ridges or even some water holes or caves, or you can put assets for buildings in here as well, but for the moment we're just going to look at building the land ourselves. So with our terrain selected in the hierarchy, we can come over to our inspector window, and all of our tools are just under this terrain tool here. So if I click on my paintbrush, there's a menu that opens up just beneath it, and if you click to open that, there's a few different things that we can do. If we select our raise or lower terrain, you have different brushes that you can select, and these are going to have different effects when we paint them onto our terrain. So as you can see, if I just have it on the round brush, as I bring it over to my terrain, I'm not clicking or anything on there yet, but if I was to click, you can see that it starts to build peaks. If I was to select a different type, and you can see that it's a rougher, different type of texture that it creates within the terrain. So if you have more of that harsher opaque brush, that's going to create quite big peaks and mountain ranges. And if you have more of this kind of stipple brush, it's really good for creating little sand mounds. You have the brush size, which you can change. You can make larger or smaller, and as you can see, that's going to cover a lot more ground on the terrain. Or you have your opacity as well. The lower the opacity means that it's not going to show up too much. If you higher the opacity, it's going to be quite opaque, and you're going to have more solid terrain that's created. As you can see over here in the inspector window, left click is to raise. And if you hold down shift and left click, it will lower it. So if I hold down shift on my keyboard and come back over to these peaks and press it down, it's going to erase them from my terrain. So it just means that if you have made any mistakes, you can just erase them down.